The name of the town doesn't really matter, but it was a big town in the middle of the country, and the first of these adventures happened to a little girl whose Christian name was Marian. She was only 7 when it happened to her, so that it was rather a young sort of adventure, but the older ones happened later on, and this is the best perhaps to begin with. Marian's house was in a street called Peter Street, because there was a church in it called St. Peter's Church, and some people liked this church because it had a great spire soaring up into the sky, but Marian's daddy didn't like spires because they were so sharp and so slippery. He liked towers better because the old church towers, he said, were like little laps ready to catch God's blessing. But Marian's daddy was a queer sort of man, and nobody took much notice of what he said. At the other end of Peter Street there was a field in which some people were beginning to build houses, and Marian used to love going into this field to watch the builders at work. But one afternoon she became tired of watching them, and so she climbed over a gate into the next field. Here the grass was so tall that it tickled Marian's chin. There were great daisies in it, taller than the grass, and they looked into Marian's eyes. They had calm faces, like Marian's mummy's Nurney's face, and they didn't mind a bit when Marian picked them. There were also buttercups, shiny and fat, like the man in the butcher's shop who was always smiling. This was such a big field that when Marian came to the middle of it, the voices of the builders were quite faint, and the tinkle of their trowels on the edges of the bricks sounded like sheep bells a long way off. When she turned round, she could see the roofs of the houses and the tops of the chimneys, and the spires of the churches all trembly because of the heat, as if they were tired and wanted to lie down. But they couldn't lie down, although they were so much older and bigger and stronger than Marian. I'd rather be me, thought Marian, and when she had picked a bundle of flowers, she lay down in the deep grass. It was so hot that, when once they had become used to her, the stalks of the grasses stood quite still. She could see hundreds and hundreds of them, like trees in a forest or people in church waiting for the anthem. Up in the hills it was different. There the grasses were always moving, not running about, of course, but standing in the same place and bending to and fro, to and fro. Some of them would move, so her father had once told her, as much as 4 miles in a single day, just as far as it was from Marian's house to the top of Fairbarrow Down. But here in the valley they weren't moving at all. They weren't even whispering. They were holding their breath, and if they were listening to anything, it was to something that a little girl couldn't hear. She stared into the sky, but it was so blue that it made her eyes ache trying to see how blue it was, and when she closed them to give them a rest, she could see little patterns on her eyelids. Then she opened them again, and the green of the grass, as she looked between the grass blades, was cool like an ointment. And nobody in the world, she thought, knows where I am. She felt a sort of tickle in the middle of her stomach. "How do you do?" said a voice. Marian gave a jump. She saw a little man looking up at her. He was not even as tall as an afternoon tea table. "What's your name?" he asked. He was very polite. He held his hat in his right hand. Marian told him her name. She wasn't a bit frightened. "What's yours?" she asked. "I'm Mr. Jugg," he said. "And who are you, Mr. Jugg?" she inquired. "I'm the king of the Bumpies," he replied. When Marian was puzzled, there came a little straight line exactly in the middle between her 2 eyebrows. "What are Bumpies?" she said. "My hat!" he gasped. "Haven't you ever heard of Bumpies?" Marian shook her head. Oh dear," he sighed. "Have you ever heard of angels?" "Well, of course," said Marian. "Everybody's heard of angels." "Well then, Bumpies," said Mr. Jugg, "are baby angels. They're called Bumpies till they've learned to fly." "I see," said Marian. "But why are they called Bumpies?" "Because they bump," said Mr. Jugg, not knowing how. Marian laughed. "Where do you live?" she asked. "If you'd care to come with me," he said.